Thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak to you today. I want to try and bring together a couple of the themes of the conference so far. So, who do we think we are and shaping the future? Possibly even answering some of the questions that have been posed so far. There was quite an interesting one from Andrea Nolan's presentation yesterday. How do we make the university understand what we deliver? So I want to try and sort of give a few different perspectives on ways we can do that. Just to go back on to some of my background, so who am I? As John says, I joined the University of Lincoln in 2012, the beginning of 2012, so I class myself still as very much a newbie to the education sector. It's been an interesting learning experience. And as John said, I worked most previously in Staples, worked in a number of different industries. Staples in Europe grew through primarily acquisition, so it wasn't deliberate other than growth of the business that they ended up with. Actually, across Europe, there was over 30 different business units, different operating units, and they had this matrix organisation structure, three-dimensional. So they had this concept of a sales channel. So you had the bricks and mortars retail stores. You had the online business. And then we had what we described as B2B, business to business. So going into organisations such as a university and selling office supplies to them. I actually had three bosses within this matrix organisation, working direct line reporting into the CIO. My incentivisation came from the performance of the region I was responsible for delivering IT to, which was the UK and Ireland region. But I also had to look after one of the sales channels, the business-to-business sales channels, which had 17 different operating units across Europe. Having three bosses, being incentivised in different ways, it created a very interesting organisation structure and set of governance and set of processes. And there was very much this sort of environment where you have the team, the management team, the senior management team of Staples Europe wanting to get everybody to work together, but because people were quite keen on getting their bonuses, being incentivised at the performance of the region, they'd do whatever it took to get that extra sale, that extra customer. So there was quite a lot of tension between those areas. So from an IT perspective, one of the things that we decided to try and help ourselves was to introduce enterprise architecture. I'm not going to try and explain enterprise architecture to you. We haven't got enough time to do that. I'm not going to tell you how to implement it, all of that. The purpose of this presentation is to talk about how you could use enterprise architecture in a different way. So I talked about flipping IT. I'm sure quite a few of you, when you first read the presentation title, reaction was, okay, he's talking about that usual phrase we hear, oh, it's flipping IT again. That reaction we get from colleagues within the business, within the university of, we're having to deal with the way IT do things, and we're having to talk about technology, etc. What I'd like to try and put over today is actually let's talk about flipping IT. So IT, by its very name, information technology, is all about the technology. That's what we're focused on, that's what we deliver, that's how we do it. It even sort of proliferates through the organisation structure, so I'm sure most of the university organisations represented here have network teams, DBA teams, application teams, all sorts of teams that are driven by the technology. So it drives the way we operate, and it's quite difficult to get away from that. there's an opportunity with enterprise architecture to take a different perspective and to start talking about what we deliver in different terms. So, what is enterprise architecture? Well, the obvious thing, there's two words there. There's the enterprise and there's the architecture. Enterprise, it can be anything you want to define it as. It can be the whole organisation, it can be a small part of the organisation, but we use TOGAF at the University of Lincoln, the Open Group Architecture Framework, and TOGAF has this example of a definition of any collection of organisations that has a series of common goals. The architecture side of it is fairly straightforward as well. Some form of formal description of a system or a detailed plan that helps you implement that system, that helps you guide through the use of the system. So, in its highest sense, enterprise architecture is fairly straightforward to understand. There's loads and loads of material you'll find out there in terms of how do you build a business case to implement enterprise architecture. Again, I'm not going to go through and try and give you all of the sales pitch on that, but there is, came across one interesting approach to an elevator pitch on enterprise architecture. If you're talking to the VC or the CFO, the FD of the organisation, why do we have a chart of accounts? We have a chart of accounts so we can consistently manage the finances of the university across the whole university and ensure that we have the finance in place to meet the strategic objectives of the university. So why do enterprise architecture? Similarly, to have a consistent way of managing change within the organisation, within the university, and make sure that we have the IT in place to meet the university's strategic objectives. So it's trying to find within your organisation who are going to be the key stakeholders that you need to define that key sales pitch to. Just a quick word a bit more about enterprise architecture before I get to the sort of point of the presentation. What are the warning signs that you might think you need enterprise architecture? There was a JISC pilot study back in 2009 that highlighted some of these things, and I know there was quite a lot of recognition yesterday about the silo environment. That is a typical thing that comes up in quite a lot of organisations, but is ICT seen as a bottleneck? Senior management don't know whether the institution gets good value for investment in ICT. These are all the sorts of things that if you're experiencing that personally within your organisation, perhaps you should think about actually putting enterprise architecture in to help you overcome some of these things. But that's not going to help you sell it. You need to be able to talk about enterprise architecture and what it will give to the organisation. And again, not trying to build a business case, but some of the things that have already been mentioned over the last 2 days, sort of improved ability to implement change, more efficient IT operation, reducing risk. These are all the sort of things that you should be able to achieve if you take an enterprise architecture approach. But how typically do organisations do change? How do they do the process of change? There's an interesting example that John Zachman used to use, which we can sort of bring into this environment, about you want to change a wall in a room, in a building. Let's say that pillar there. This is an environment where we've got a group of people, and the people in the cheap seats get sat behind the pillar, and people in the expensive seats are right here. So the hotel comes along and says, we want to remove the pillar. How do they go about doing that? Simple thing could be, right, we'll just knock it down, and what do you end up with? A pile of bricks. Just have a go at it with a load of sledgehammers, see what happens when you finish it. You could start drilling holes in it, see if there's any services and utilities going through it, see if there's a girder in the middle of it, so you could try experimenting with it. The architectural approach is, well, actually, let's pull out the building plans, let's see how the building was built, let's see whether there is load bearing, let's see whether there is electric cables going through it, etc., etc. it's that sort of approach that will remove some of the risk just knocking the wall down. Enterprise architecture is actually quite a bit more than that. In fact, when you think about enterprise architecture, you're more akin to talking about planning a town or planning a city. So again, within the environment of a university, you haven't got a single building, you've got multiple buildings. So you need to understand what the impact is of creating a change within one of those buildings. If this hotel wants to create bigger space for a conference like this, rather than just considering what's happening in this room, have a look around the whole building. There might be a better way of actually managing that change, providing whatever is being requested, which is the increased conferencing space. So it's that process of actually trying to get an understanding of the whole organisation. As I say, we've used TOGAF, so I'll use TOGAF as the sort of context for explaining how you do enterprise architecture. TOGAF uses this concept of domains, architectural domains. And the top of the domain is the business architecture. So I think James Smith in his presentation yesterday talked about process is king. It's actually a little bit more than just process. It's about understanding the organisation structures, understanding the processes, roles and responsibilities, understanding the governance there. I've got to say that, yeah, absolutely, that experience I had in Staples of the complex organisation structure that I was working in there has absolutely nothing on the university organisation structure. The academic structures, so whether you have colleges, faculty, schools, the research organisation structure, the professional services supporting structures, is it centralised, is it decentralised, is it shared service, whatever approach, the committee meeting governance structure that sits on top of that makes it such a complicated environment that if you don't have an understanding of the business, you stand no chance of trying to introduce any change. So understanding the application and the data architecture, so the information systems that we provide into the organisation, and understanding the technology that sits underneath it. TOGAF is the TOGAF framework has an architecture development method which takes you through those domains, those architectural domains, so you understand the business before you look at the applications, before you look at the technology, and you cycle through creating a picture of where we are now, understanding the requirements for the university, the strategic objectives, the vision of the future, to create a target model of where we want to be in the future, and a target model for the business, because the university doesn't stand still, it wants to move, so you have where we are today in the future state. And similarly with the applications, the information systems, and the technology there. And what that gives you is effectively the roadmap of what you want to implement. It's not a single cycle through, it's an iterative process. In fact, it never ever finishes. Organisations don't stop changing, they carry on moving. So you do need to sort of embody that within your organisation. So what does it give you? Well, this is where we're getting into the sort of meat of the presentation. What value can we get out of enterprise architecture to help us talk to the university in a different way? When you actually do get into using one of these modelling tools, you get some extremely complicated diagrams, and actually presenting the sort of diagram here where you have the links between, we've got a business service, it's, I don't know, enrolling a student. So what gets involved in enrolling a student? You've got the student information system, the student management system. You might have the ID card production system. You might have a couple of other systems which sit on top of servers, some of it might be within your data center, some of it might be delivered software as a service. So you've got all of those relationships there, and it becomes a very complicated diagram. But the thing that it gives you, the important thing are those relationships. So you understand that the technology supports these elements of the information systems, that the information systems support these business processes, that these business processes actually deliver those business services. So you can actually then start talking to the organisation in terms of their business services. And rather than saying, right, we're going to deliver a new database, a new Oracle database or SQL database or whatever it is for the student management system, but we're going to have to integrate it with the timetabling system and the account management system, the network account management system. You can actually just start talking to them about things in their own terms, in the terms of the organisation that you're part of. It's that advantage that you get from rather than sitting down and saying, right, okay, what are we going to do about replacing the student management system? The session, one of the sessions that we had this morning was quite interesting, talking about, okay, the heartbeat of the student information system. Actually, what we should be talking about is the heartbeat of the university, of the journey of the student through the university, or the journey of the research project, or the researcher through the university, or the member of staff, or the partner that you're partnering up with for external income generation. What is their journey through the university, regardless of what systems that you're using? That then allows you to have that sensible conversation with the university and get them to understand that actually to deliver that change in that business service or that business process requires the change to the underlying architectures of information systems and technology. That just about covers the enterprise architecture pitch. So where does it sit within IT? Enterprise architecture, I mean, you can draw a load of different diagrams. You can put enterprise architecture in the middle of this. But it does, if you implement it to its fullest, it does touch on virtually everything else that not just what we do in IT, but what the university does. There's obviously that two-way link between university planning, understanding what the strategy and the vision of the university is, so that we can build that into the understanding of the business domain. Enterprise architecture drives that roadmap of activity that we need to do. So from the current state to the future state, that's your roadmap and creates your portfolio of projects and activities. Provides the sort of governance over how we develop solutions. So let's develop solutions in a consistent way, using the same tools, using the same technologies, reusing, etc. And once those solutions are delivered, what you can do with enterprise architecture within your operations environment is break down those conversations that you have with the various people around the university about, right, I actually want to enroll a student, but I've got a problem with it. You can actually use the information that you learn through enterprise architecture to have a more sensible conversation with them, rather than drilling straight into, okay, we've got a problem with the Oracle database, or we've got a problem with the SQL database, this is what's going wrong. And basically them just describing, oh, it's that flipping IT system again. So enterprise architecture can help you to start thinking about, well, should I have an organisation structure within IT that consists of just purely individual technically focused teams, or should I consider looking at a future of teams that are built around delivering business services and focusing on how do we deliver those business services? We can't get rid of the technology, but if we can start getting ourselves and the university talking in those terms, we might be able to have a more structured and have our colleagues around the university understand what we're trying to deliver in their own terms. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about. There's a few references on there that I think will be provided in the slide pack afterwards. So I think the question that I would finish off with is, do we want to be flipping IT, or do we want to do flipping IT? Thank you.
We've plenty of time for some questions, so I don't know if anybody's got anything.
Hi, good afternoon. Nathan, Falmouth University. We've basically put all of our IT into a shared service company that we own. How do you see EA working within a shared service environment? Or how it should work, or hope it would work?
I don't think, I mean, enterprise architecture is agnostic as far as whatever solution you want to come out. I mean, some of the things that typically get associated with enterprise architecture is right, you're doing enterprise architecture, so you must be implementing a service-orientated architecture, or you must be doing this, that, and the other. It depends on what your organisation is, and that applies all the way down to the technology layer of actually, does it matter that you own a data centre? Does it matter that actually you're not delivering an application, you're delivering a service through software as a service? It doesn't matter at all. As long as you understand how the business operates and what the business requirements are, rather than just going out and buying a new student management system and going to the vendor and saying, can you deliver it as software as a service, or can you deliver it in a shared service centre, can you deliver it, you host the system. What you're asking for is, can you deliver the services that the university wants to operate? So can you deliver something that will allow me to recruit a student, to enrol a student, to record all of their life through the university, to deal with their pastoral needs, etc. Whether it's delivered through a shared service centre or through software as a service, it doesn't matter. As long as you keep a record of that within your enterprise architecture, and every time you make another change, you understand what the impact of making a change in one area on the other area.
Hello, John from the University of Bath. IT by itself can't just go away and do enterprise architecture. It obviously needs a lot of business engagement, and for that the business really need to understand the value of this. I just wondered how you pitched that, how you managed to sell that into the often cynical academic community.
Yes. Very good question. How do you get the buy-in from the university? One of the things that I would absolutely recommend is, don't present it as an IT initiative. The way we've managed to get quite a bit of buy-in is to actually get colleagues within the sort of academic community and the professional services community involved in doing enterprise architecture. TOGAF actually recommends having a governance structure which includes an architecture board with various interested parties. We tweaked it slightly. We've got an advisory board rather than a full governance board. But having representation from, we have 3 colleges within the university, so representation from each of the 3 colleges, having representation from most of the professional services, actually getting some outside help, outside the university altogether. I'm fortunate that Phil Richards, who used to be the IT director for Loughborough, moved on to JISC. Before he moved on to JISC, I persuaded him to sit on our advisory board for our architecture. So having that sort of, okay, it's not us saying it, it's somebody externally sitting there having the conversation with you and saying it. Interestingly, probably one of the bigger challenges that we had was not within the university, but it was actually within the department itself, of getting that flipped approach away from talking about technology and away from talking about our service catalogue, for example. We're trying to implement at the moment a service catalogue defined by the business services rather than by the technologies. It's actually been our own IT people that probably have struggled most with this concept and moving away from, not moving away from talking about the technology in terms of business services rather than just I'm delivering a network or I'm delivering a DBA service. Does that help? Thank you.
Hi, where should enterprise architecture sit within an organisation, in the structure of an organisation? Where's the best place for it to fit? And, sorry, second question.
Yeah.
What scale of resourcing should go into it?
Right. The easy answer to that is the cop-out answer to that, which is it very much depends on your own organisation. I know it's difficult. Within Lincoln and within my previous organisation, Staples, where we also use TOGAF, it sat within IT. I have seen other organisations where it sat as a sort of a bridge between IT and the rest of the organisation, and probably if you have a PMO that sits outside IT, you probably would have a good chance at creating an enterprise architecture that sits out, team that sits outside of IT. In terms of size, it's one of these things. I've got to create the balance between the resource I put into enterprise architecture, the resource I put into developing new solutions, the resource I put into the business as usual stuff. You can always grab as much resource as you want to do enterprise architecture. It takes a long time. We started shortly after I joined. Fortunately, the university was already thinking about this before I joined, so it wasn't that hard a battle. But 3 years down, and we're still getting into the refinements of the sort of first 2 iterations of the full cycle. It takes an awful long time. The more people you throw at it, the quicker it will get. So as many people as you can afford, but it's, I mean, we started off with 1 person doing it.
One quick question just down here.
Hello, Mary Hill, Sheffield Hallam. I'm interested in knowing what tools Lincoln have used for EA, and how have they aided progress, and have they hindered progress in any way?
We use a product called redesign. It's not the cheapest, but it's by far not the most expensive tool out there. It's quite good. I mean, we had a look at a range of tools. I won't list all of them, but quite a lot of the failings in that we discovered in them was the lack of a central repository. I think you need to look for a tool which has a central repository that links all of your of the information you collect, all the artifacts that you collect from each of the domains. You could do enterprise architecture in Visio if you wanted to, but you need somebody very, very, very rigorous in terms of managing all of those domains. The benefit you get from a tool is that where you do make a change to something in any one of the domains or the layers within those domains, having a tool which has that central repository that links everything together, make sure that the ability to see what the impact of that change. So if you want to take out a server, if you want to change this from infrastructure on campus to infrastructure via a hosted service, what does that mean for integration of your applications, and therefore what does it mean in terms of the impact on the business service? Having a tool to do an awful lot of that for you automatically saves a lot of the pain and the heartache of, right, I forgot that bit was connected to that bit. It's the analogy of, I didn't realise there was a water pipe going through that pillar before I knocked it down. Having records of all of those that you can have a tool that links them all together is definitely a big benefit.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Drew. That was very
Thank you.
interesting. And,